Welcome to my Ruby Slippers. I'm Lily Strong from the blog Lily Strong.
And I'm Silly Strong, and even though I was making her laugh right before hitting play or record, I'm still her favorite middle child.
It's so true. It's really hard to make me laugh.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure all of our listeners can tell from
Yeah.
hearing us laugh literally through every conversation.
It really does help getting through the heavy stuff, though.
Yeah, I mean,
To be a little lighthearted and
yeah.
be able to laugh at things in retrospect is
Humor to cope is a good,
really is.
yeah, good thing.
So today is part 2 of our spiritual abuse talk. And to just remind everybody, spiritual abuse is anytime spiritual language is used to control, manipulate, or oppress. And abuse happens when there is an imbalance of power.
Yeah. So this episode, we wanted to focus more on our personal experiences and the actual community members that we were interacting with, and also our abuser, my dad. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, 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 yes.
So last time we kind of talked about how growing up in the church set us up to be in a position that we were easily abused.
Right. And we were taught not to question things.
Taught not to question
And this
things.
was reinforced by the people around us.
Absolutely. And again, I keep going back to the imbalance of power. Maybe it's the teacher in me, but I just feel like if you're constantly teaching people or children to never take power for themselves,
Right.
it's dangerous. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was thinking, I was doing a training that mentioned child abuse and stuff, and
Those are the worst. They're so sad.
but it was really interesting to have it pointed out, one sign of abuse, of emotional abuse, is a child who is too obedient. And I'm like, that was me.
Yeah.
That was me. I was always loved by all my teachers because I was such a good little kid.
Right.
The teacher's pet effect and all that.
Interesting.
Sure thing. But yeah. But anyways,
We wanted to talk about some of our personal stories.
right.
I feel like I was always super involved in our church, and
Right.
I used to do Bible studies, and I worked with youth group, and I was just heavily involved, and I
Yeah.
loved being a part of other people's lives.
Right.
And I felt like I was doing good things and enriching lives. So I had a really hard time when I first discovered your dad was lying about literally
Yeah.
everything. I, at the time, didn't know still that he had been cheating, but he had
Right.
been lying. He had been, oh gosh, manipulating and trying to control me and trying to push me so fast to forgive him. And I was like pumping the brakes. I'm like, wait, we've got to sit back here and figure out because we're so broken.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is fixable.
Right.
And I did seek wise counsel. I went to some people in the church. And it was funny because without that cheating component,
Yeah.
no one really wanted to say, hey, everything else he's doing is really bad.
Right.
And obviously, everything he was doing was really bad and it was abusive. But they had such a hard time pointing that out.
Yeah.
One lady I went to, before I even told her the story, she handed me a book about how to be a better praying wife.
Right.
And it's a good book. I'd read it. I had read it about parenting.
Okay.
So, yeah, I prayed for you as a parent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But as I told her the story little by little, I could see her glancing next to me at that book, and I felt like she kind of wanted to just snatch it away after a while, like, oh, this is not for you. But,
Right.
but she didn't. She would not say, oh my gosh, you're in danger, you're being abused.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
It was pray,
Yeah.
pray. And I understand that, I mean, I have a good connection with God. Yeah, I do pray. I do rely on Him. But sometimes I need a little more.
Right. I mean, in later like counseling and stuff, you were advised to get together a bag
Yeah,
just in case something happened and you needed to run immediately.
yeah,
Prayer is not enough in that situation.
right.
If prayer was enough, there would be a lot of abuse situations that would not have occurred.
That's true.
And it's not on you.
Well, and I love that you say that because the God that I know, the God that loves me, He does not want me to be abused.
Right.
He doesn't want horrible things to be happening to me. And so it's such a disconnect then to be like, God hates divorce. You're stuck in marriage for better for worse. You made a promise. You
Right.
made a pinky swear. And you can't get out of it now.
Right.
Just because he's treating you terribly doesn't
Just
matter.
because he's literally acting like he's completely out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting that I had a few people that were like that. And then I was talking with my cousin who
Mm-hmm.
has been my rock through so much of this. She's the one that gave me a place to escape to, a place to live,
Yeah.
and has been really helping me in so many different ways. She's also a therapist, so she has so many words of wisdom.
Right.
But she's the one that just said, when I was saying, but he hasn't cheated. And she said, but he has been unfaithful
Yeah.
in every imaginable way.
Right.
And I was like, you're right. The Bible doesn't really say it has to be a sexual cheating.
Right. And I had brought this up once that like there's such a highlight put on like sexual unfaithfulness because it was considered so important with women being treated as property and
Mm-hmm.
their sexual purity was so important and blah blah blah. And like obviously, sexual unfaithfulness does suck and it's bad, but it's really treated like it's a completely different realm from every other kind of unfaithfulness.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of wanted to circle back to the question of just how did community members let you down in your time of need? You had counselors that you let you down.
Yes.
You had people around you who you went to.
Well, I got a lot of the God hates divorce talk.
Yeah.
A lot. A lot. A lot.
Yeah.
I think that's just what anybody defers to. If they don't know what to say,
Yeah.
they just say, well, God hates divorce.
Right.
And you don't want to do anything that God hates.
Right.
It's not dislike, it is hate. Oh my gosh.
And I mean, you've brought up before, like, again, going back to these things were written for what needed to be safety rules at the time. Like, if a
Right.
woman got divorced, then she was left with
Right.
nothing.
So in Bible times, a woman was either married or she would become a prostitute. I mean, there
Right.
was very little.
They couldn't own
They couldn't own
anything.
anything. They couldn't have a profession.
Yeah.
So these were kind of safeguards to protect women of the time,
Yeah.
to say to the men, hey guys, I hate it when you're divorcing your wives to go off for the newer, younger
You're
version.
right, right.
So that was not acceptable. And it doesn't translate over into modern times too well.
Right, because we've started deconstructing that stuff.
Right. But that's still the first thing people say.
Yeah.
When, I mean, I did actually go to people and say, so I'm thinking I might need to divorce my husband. And people would say that to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. God hates
Yeah.
divorce. Before they even knew all the particulars, it was kind of like if it wasn't him off having a second family somewhere, then I had no
No reason.
reason to divorce him.
Right.
Or if he wasn't like abusing me to the point where I had black eyes every Sunday, I had no reason to divorce
Right.
him. And it should take a Christian counselor that I only was able to see a few times, but she was really amazing. She told me, okay, so the Bible says God hates divorce, But how many times does it say that God loves you?
Right.
And there's just too many times to even count. So which one is going to carry the greater weight?
Right.
Does God hate divorce more than he loves you? No.
No.
God loves you. And growing up with the idea that God is a father figure, which means something totally different from me than it means to you. If you just think of it as being a parental figure,
Right.
God wants to love you. God wants the best things for you. I mean, I look at you guys, and like we had talked about how there's something you want to try to do something that I would disapprove of without permission.
Right. Right.
I don't know if there's really all that much because I want what's best for you.
Right.
And I can't imagine sitting there going, no, I hate dyeing hair red. I can't believe you did that.
Right.
So your dad came into our marriage and to our family very much thinking he was the authority figure, very much thinking that he had all the answers, very much feeling like he was closer to God than me.
Right.
And part of that was because he did go to a Christian university for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So we think, pretty sure he's not lying about that
Yeah,
one.
I think that would be harder to.
But he carried that throughout our whole marriage.
Right.
And if I think about it, okay, maybe he had some chapel classes under his belt.
Right.
But I was taking you guys to church pretty much every week for 20 years.
Yeah.
And he didn't go with us.
Right.
And this was something that it still bugs me because my dad didn't go to church with us much when I was growing up because he owned his own business. He was a very hard worker.
Yeah.
So he was often working on Sundays.
Right.
Not just resting. He was often at work.
Yeah.
And I remember complaining saying, "Okay, when we have kids, you can't do that." Because you don't have a good reason.
Right, right.
You need to be active in our church. And he was like, of course, of course, of course. And then it gets back to the line of he was saying he was at work all day on Saturday and he was exhausted. And so on Sunday he couldn't go to church.
Right.
And it's disgusting to me to think that, the family was out of the house. So he was probably just sitting at home watching porn. It's like that is not a good trade-off. But through it out, he acted like he was moralistically superior.
Right. And I mean, I had brought up like his twin brother was a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and like my dad would like make fun of him being a nerd, or like that he like would study and all that when he was like, oh, I don't need to do that. But then he really acted like he was a pastor. I'm like,
He did.
he loved to give his sermons.
He gave his sermons to us, yes.
To tell us it was all our faults. That was one thing that I would go to him for when I was having like anxiety a lot at first. He was more available than you, shockingly. Mm-hmm. And I would go to him when I had anxiety, and he made it feel like it was my fault. Mm-hmm. Because I wasn't giving everything up to God.
Mm-hmm.
AKA, he wanted me to be over it.
Right, because the truth was he doesn't give everything up to God. Or
no.
At the time he didn't. Interestingly enough, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but once I said I'm done and walked away from the marriage, started the divorce proceedings, he then decided he was born again Christian.
Right.
And he just wants to pray for me and he just wants to pray for you and he's worried about our salvation.
Yeah.
Because he's now, saved.
Right. And he's just maintained the moral superiority with the religious the entire time.
Yep, absolutely. But one of the stories he told me was he was like, I feel so close to God. I just feel like his light is shining in me and I want it to flow from me into you.
Right.
And I remember just saying, Why do I need you for God's love to shine through to
Right.
me? God's love already shines through to me. I don't need you. Because that again is imbalance of power. He's putting himself above
Yeah.
me. He's making it
You need
a
him.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that going back to the poor Mormons that we keep bashing. But, the woman, the guy gets to marry 7 women. I guess it's not actually Mormonism then. I guess it's LDS or I don't know.
Those are the same.
There's like some sect though that still
Um,
believes in polygamy.
oh, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but the man can have 7 wives, and they only get to heaven through him.
Right.
So if they get divorced, they're not going to heaven. And I feel like your dad would have loved that system.
I don't know. I don't know if you'd be able to remember names.
That's funny.
He was not invested in people enough for that.
No, only what he could get
Yeah.
from them.
So back to like when he was re-accepting Christ and stuff. You had also mentioned you discovered later that his friend's dad had had the exact same story.
Yeah. Yeah, this was really weird because it was almost like he took a script
Yeah.
and was reading it. It was super bizarre. But he had told me that he was saved again,
Right.
all because of me. And did I not understand how this amazing thing was that I was saving him and his eyes were opened and all these sort of things? And of course, if anyone tells you that, you want to be like, yay.
Mhm.
You want to hope for them that
Yeah.
this is a good thing. You don't want to say, oh my gosh, I don't believe you.
But it was such a diversion tactic.
It really
Yeah.
was. It really was. But he was like, I swear, at this point in time, I knew he had cheated. And he was saying, I swear I'll never cheat. And I'm a new man. And so he kind of thought he should get almost like a free pass
Right.
for the last 30 years. But then one day, I got together with a couple of friends. One of my friends was married to one of your dad's old best friends.
Right.
They had been best friends like in high school and
Yeah.
college age. Like kind of lost touch over the last few years while we were in Texas, but and he knew him. He knew a lot about
Right.
him. And so he had a lot of questions for me, and he was very supportive. His wife had already kind of filled him in on some of the basic stories, and
Yeah.
he's like, okay, I just have to tell you this. I don't know if you know this story, but my dad did the same thing to my mom.
Right.
And this was when he was like in his 20s. So
Yeah.
he wasn't like a little kid, it was an adult, gray divorce situation, like just like
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, and he did almost the exact same thing. He had cheated on my mom with multiple people, not the emotional affair, but it was clear
Right.
cheating, ongoing cheating. And he said suddenly, oh my gosh, I'm saved. And now you can't divorce me because God hates divorce, and we need to reconcile because I'm turning over a new leaf.
Right.
And he said, I just want you to know that my mom did not leave my dad, and I always thought she was wrong.
Oh. Yeah.
And it was bizarre though, because it was like he had taken his best friend's story and then told me, like almost reading it word for word from a
Right.
script.
Right.
And so that then has called into question for me. Well, I mean, I guess I have to question everything,
Right.
anyways.
And like, if anything, probably to him, he probably was like, "Oh, I've heard stories of people in the past where they were able to reconcile afterwards because they turned to God."
Right.
And it's just, but it's an empty motion because, like, you know, maybe he did genuinely, have a spiritual rebirth and whatever. I don't care. That's not changing anything about his relationship with you.
Right.
And it's not like he was better to you after it.
Right. He was still saying things like, God's going to shine love through me to you.
Right. I mean, he was still, yeah. And he was still, I mean, yeah, he still sucked.
And this is something you will totally understand. He started going to Bible studies and support groups.
Right.
And he would tell me, well, everybody in my group thinks we've got a great chance.
Yeah.
And everyone thinks we're going to reconcile. And I'm like, who's saying this?
Yeah, and what details did you give them?
Exactly.
And I thought we weren't supposed to talk about marriage outside of our marriage.
Right. But in a support group setting, that then you've got the authority figure. Your dad always had a thing about authority
Yeah.
figures. So, like, when I first left him and came out here and said, you've got to leave me alone, I just can't think with you constantly calling and
Yeah.
texting, made no difference. But as soon as I said, okay, my therapist said I need a 2 week window of no communication, then he was like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, he always needs that authority figure. It doesn't matter what I say because I'm just the dumb female.
Right.
I'm always wrong
Yeah.
by default.
But it's weird that he would listen to a therapist.
Yeah, one, he was trying to use his therapist as an authority figure
Right.
also.
Right.
His therapist said it was taking too long for me to heal, so something was wrong. And
Which we don't believe that the therapist actually said that.
no, I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, just really, really bizarre. Again, it just messes with the mind because then I don't know, is any of it real?
Yeah.
Is he just borrowing other people's stories? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's abusive.
Yes.
All of it is abusive.
Yes. And I mean, with the whole like, oh, he started going to a different church and blah blah blah. Like that was a big thing for me because he had told me that he had been looking into a new church that was a little more accepting of people who'd made mistakes or were a little different or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And this was recently after I'd come out.
Mm-hmm. And he said specifically he thought you were going to be more comfortable there.
Yes. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay. And then I look into it and they're still like, yeah, we believe you shouldn't be gay and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, huh,
Yeah.
why is this going to be better for me? And then I went and it was fine, but I didn't really chime in at all at the beginning of the episode. But you had mentioned, like, you've always been a strong Christian, you've always been very close with the church. And you did take us to church for like a decent amount of the time at least. But I never felt that connected, I guess. Um, I had a couple friends that I made, and but I never felt close with them. I always felt separate. It genuinely did feel like going to school.
Okay.
I liked it a little bit better when I started volunteering with the special needs group. I started doing that, and that was, I don't know, like that at least felt like something that wasn't just school, but I still wasn't connecting with, especially not peers my age,
Right.
but even with like the other volunteers or the kids, I never felt that connected to just like anybody. So it never really was community to me. I mean, I brought up in the last episode, I went on a few trips with the church, and there was a couple of years where some of my friends from school came with us.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also like, at least a couple of them were like, they went to their own church and, you know, would go with my church on these trips because the trips were fun.
Mm-hmm.
But we were friends outside of church.
Right.
Like our basis of friendship was not that we were Christian. I mean, we were like, what, 10, 11? Like, that's not the greatest, like, bond between two 10-year-olds is we both believe in God. And those years were great.
Mm-hmm.
But the years that didn't happen, it was like, oh, there's drama. Or there was the one year where I was just kind of bullied the whole time.
Yeah.
There was one year where it was a little bit different, where it was like a little bit better, and I didn't feel terribly alone. But first of all, the girls I connected with, we never talked again after that trip.
Huh.
I mean, because a lot of them would go to different school or different churches and definitely different
Right.
schools. It was like, okay, like it's hard to keep up with that when
Right.
you're never really gonna see each other. And then like especially in like middle school, there was all the like, oh, it's so gross when girls don't shave their legs. Like, I just can't even imagine not shaving your legs. And again, middle school, I wasn't really shaving my legs much then. And I was just like, oh, okay, haha.
Was that at church or school or both?
Church. It was on a church trip because, we were
Oh.
out swimming a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so they were talking about how it's so gross. And it's like, I was like 13 at the location then.
And it's just so disheartening to hear things like that when it's nature.
Yeah,
Well, hair grows on our legs.
right.
Yeah.
And it's again like I know that beauty standards do make it seem like brain perceives it as gross. Like I do understand that. But again, 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't need to be shaving my legs every day as a 14. And I'm very pale and I have very dark hair.
Yes.
I'm Italian.
Yes.
I'm hairy. I take testosterone. I had a mustache before I started testosterone. I had beard hairs before I started. Like, that was just my body.
Right.
So, yeah, just like all these like little things where it was just like, I don't feel accepted.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel connected. So, I was never particularly in tune with the church community, especially because I would go and they would be saying like these hateful messages, and
Right.
I'd go back to school with my best friends who are gay, and
Right.
I'm like, I don't fit in here. Yeah.
Do you think that made you? How do I want to say that? Do you think if you were able to connect more, that that would make any difference?
I don't know. I can't really guess.
Yeah.
I can't, you know, be like, oh yeah, I totally know exactly how it would have gone.
Well, it seems like the church set up for you a framework of how you should act and, rules.
Yeah,
But then without the connection of community, that's so empty.
right. I think it definitely, I mentioned in the last episode, I don't have a huge sense of grief towards losing
Mm-hmm.
the church or losing, what I had before. I think it definitely maybe wouldn't have given me so much freedom, like the feeling of freedom, if
Mm-hmm.
I had more connections there. Yeah.
I know when I first moved out here, I went into a support group for people who were divorcing. So they're
Yeah.
in the process
Yeah.
of it. And that was great for the most part.
Right.
But there was the one week, it was like a video series that you would watch the video and then talk about it.
Mm.
And we were all remote because it was COVID lockdown still.
Right.
So we were all at our own homes watching on our computers. And I still able to like connect and make connections with the people.
Yeah.
But then it came out with the one, God hates divorce. If there's a chance of reconciliation, you should try. And I was like, oh my gosh. Even in a divorce group,
That's crazy.
I'm not being supported.
No.
Most people aren't going to just say, oh, I just woke up in a bad mood. I'm going to get divorced today.
Yeah, like that's not
Right.
the.
It's not an easy process.
No.
So, oh, yeah, that was kind of hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And since we've been out here, I have not found a new church to go to, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm actually totally fine.
Yeah. You've definitely been able to find community here, and there's, Christians around you still. Like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not that you're disconnected entirely, but, you've been able to form your own community
Right.
on your own. Well, not on your own, but with family and with community.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is very much fulfilling.
It
Yeah.
is. And I can see maybe one day like setting down roots in a church again.
Right.
Um, but right now, I feel, I mean, honestly, I feel resentment towards
Yeah.
the church as an institution
Yeah.
because I feel like it taught me to accept abuse.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean I definitely have a lot of I mean again I know that there are churches that are a lot better about these things
Mm-hmm.
and um, kudos to them,
Yeah,
but it really is a situation where I'm like it's hard to ever go back to that and you don't have to go back to that and
that's true.
you're not you're not an isolated person.
No,
Like I think anything where the Bible is going to be talking about, like, you know, you should be loving your neighbor and giving to your community and et cetera, et cetera. Like, you still do that. You volunteer with a community group. You
right,
talk with neighbors and you give a lot of support to a lot of people. And like, you're still in touch with people
right,
and in
right.
touch with your faith. So there's nothing like, you know, people will say, like, you need to go to church or you're in danger.
Right.
But I think
I think I have enough good friends that are willing to talk openly about spiritual
true.
their spiritual lives and things that have touched them.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me. I also wanted to bring up how I kind of felt sad the one time when I saw like a post on Instagram of somebody I had grown up with like all through school. And she made this post about like her good friend and it was all about how like they keep each other accountable
Okay.
and like I love you for always keeping me accountable to God. And I'm like, how sad is that that's your relationship?
Yeah.
And like I've seen other posts that she's made that are very similar and I'm like, you should be allowed to have friends that you're just having fun. Like I mean, obviously I want my friends to hold me accountable if I'm being an asshole,
Yeah.
but like even just friends can be used as like this policing factor for religion and that sucks
It
because it's the
does.
people that you thought you could trust, the people you thought you loved
Right.
are then like, well, it's conditional because if you mess up then
Right.
and that just always strikes. I'm so glad my friends were not like that.
And that seems so against God. I mean, what
Right.
God's wants and his
Right.
plans.
And like I mean everything we were always taught at least like you know you should hold each other accountable and you should have discernment. That was always a big thing was the discernment.
Discernment.
Oh my god. But, you know, you can have friends that you're not.
What?
You don't have to call out your friends all the
Are
time.
you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
I thought they would like me better if I told them constantly how what they were doing wrong.
And see, you've never been that type.
No.
But there are people who are that type.
There
Or the
are.
people, I mean, like dad, you know?
Right.
Or the people who are like, oh my god, you're so lazy for not getting up at like 6 a.m. to go to church early and whatever. Like,
Right.
okay, whatever, man.
You know, that made me think of another story. Another little tangent.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I might have told you this before.
Maybe.
I remember going to a woman's retreat with my best friend,
Mm-hmm.
who I call my soul friend, and we had roommates with us. And one of the roommates was somebody I knew but not super well.
Yeah.
We had the conversation that if she got to a certain age and she was not married, she still wanted to be a mom. And so she said, so, one way or another, I'll adopt or something.
Right.
I just, that's something I've always wanted to be.
Right.
Just because I don't find a husband doesn't mean I can't be a good mom.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, you'd be a fabulous mom. You
Right.
would be fun. You'd be great. And then I remember telling your dad that same story.
Yeah.
And he just made me feel horrible. He's
Right.
like, how could you even support somebody who doesn't have a man and a wife? And,
Right.
the white father and mother is such an important structure and all this stuff. And
It's like, why?
then to look back at how he failed you guys so much.
Literally, he did nothing.
Yeah. It's like you guys would have been just fine as a single family.
Yeah, and I mean, that's such a big thing about when people are talking about divorce. Like, they've 100% found across the board it's better for bad couples to get divorced than to stay
Absolutely.
together for the kids, quote unquote.
We've talked about how I'm a better person. I'm a happier person.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you are much more able to do that, to, like, be available
Yeah.
because you're not having to care for a man child.
Exactly.
And, I mean, obviously divorce situations are tricky and kids can take it, hard. But at the end of the day, it's not helpful to have, you know,
Negativity.
negativity.
Yeah.
And I mean, I cannot imagine. Like, I know there's a lot of issues with like the foster and adoption systems.
Yeah.
Like, they'll do better with a good mom than being stuck in an
Absolutely.
institution that isn't able to give them individual care.
But it's kind of surprising to me now to look back and see how he thought he could belittle me for supporting somebody
Right.
in that manner.
Right.
I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, hey, I'm going to go adopt without you.
Right. Right.
I'm like, no, she'd honestly be a great mom
Yeah.
because she really would be.
Yeah.
And no, that was bad.
Yeah.
I totally failed, and God was going to frown at me. And
Right. Well, and that was like something I was going to bring up was how he would love to call our faith into question.
constantly,
Because, when you're like religious, if somebody calls your faith into question, you get defensive.
yeah,
And then it's a lot easier to manipulate you if you're being defensive.
yes,
Yeah.
he always had us on the defensive.
Yes.
Always.
100% of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the whole walking on eggshells
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
You just didn't know with him what he was going. I mean, I knew he'd always, if given the chance, he was going to throw religion at us,
Right.
even though he didn't act like a religious person.
At all.
Yeah. But you just didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah.
He could either be like, oh yeah, whatever, or he could be angry.
Yeah.
There's no way of knowing.
Yep. So, one of the last questions that we have is just if you could rewrite at least one damaging, quote unquote, truth that we were told by the people around us, what would it be?
I think it would be that God's love is unconditional.
Hmm.
It says that in the Bible, but we don't listen to it.
Right. For
We
a second, I
say,
thought you were like, wait, you're saying it's conditional?
no, it says it in the
Yeah.
Bible
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
unconditional, and yet society is like, oh, but he also meant you have
Right.
to be perfect, and you have to dress nice at church,
Yeah.
and you have to do good things, all that sort
Right.
of thing.
Yeah, I think for me, it really is probably down to a lot of, Mr. Misogyny being like, oh, you were made to be dumb and pretty, um,
Subservient.
subservient, and, I mean, I don't think he even attempted with me the subservience thing. I can act that way, but I don't think I ever was really like that with. I'm the saddest middle child. It's sad that I'm the most rebellious one of the family, but I definitely was the most rebellious one of the family.
Yeah.
Um,
In a good way.
oh yeah, but as a result, he treated me as different. I was very singled out, but he still did talk about like you're surprisingly smart, but also you're never gonna be like
Yeah.
as smart. And I know a lot of that is
It's his ego.
right. And like a lot of that is stuff I've already talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
But he did tie that into biblical stuff. He was
Mm-hmm.
always like, God made you to be pretty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God made you to not you don't need to do this. And I'm like, okay, but God, you know,
Gave you a brain to think?
yeah. Or like, you know, I have this personality, gonna use it.
Watch out, world.
Yeah. Oh, really watch out. I'm gonna
I'm going to giggle
say
at you.
nonsense. Yeah. I'm gonna talk more about video games and yeah.
Anything else you want to add about spiritual abuse at home?
Not that I can think of. Do you?
Anytime spirituality is weaponized,
Yeah.
it's never going to have a good end result.
Right.
That's not what we're supposed to do.
No.
Weaponizing anything with emotions and feelings, intangible things that can't be measured,
Right.
it's it's abusive and it's a form of manipulation.
Right. Yeah, and again, it's always about shame,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think we're going to talk about shame in our next
Yes,
episode.
we need to have a shame episode, even though it's just a recurring theme in general. But, it's just using shame as that kind of weapon to keep you in line is
Mm-hmm.
so powerful. And sometimes you kind of have to just be like, whatever, I'll be ashamed. It's fine.
Right.
You know, it's better to be a little embarrassed or like let somebody question your belief or let somebody question, if you're doing the right thing, than it is to just like live untruthfully or to live under abuse.
100%, 1,000%. I would much rather have to deal with a little bit of shame that I got
Oh, no.
divorced than rather than still be in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, let's wrap up for this week. And until we talk to you again, just remember, like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home.
And home is where you can build your own supportive community.